This 911 Strong podcast is brought to you by our partners at the Police Credit Union of California.
As a financial institution founded by law enforcement for law enforcement and their families over 65 years ago, they have the experience and understanding to help you with all your financial needs,
including exclusive products designed specifically for law enforcement professionals. To become a member today, visit thepolicecu.org. That's the police, the letter C, and the letter U.org.
Or call 800-222-1391 and tell them you heard about them from the 911 Strong podcast. Hey friends, welcome back to the 911 Strong podcast. On this episode, we have a very special guest. We have police officer and MMA superstar Ashley Smashley Cummins joining us today. I thought it was a pretty good podcast. What'd you think, Kristen?
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
She's a badass.
Yeah. I mean, she not only was in the riots in St. Louis, she also participated in some of the disturbances here in Southern California, and she handles it with such ease, especially for someone as small as she is.
Yeah.
She's a badass. She's a lot packed into a little package, kind of like our podcast.
Oh my gosh, no. I don't think we can compare the two.
Probably not.
She's amazing. Yeah,
she is.
I was a little bit fangirling.
Yeah. All right. Well, hope you guys enjoy this episode of the 911 Strong podcast. It starts right now.
Right now.
Station to all units.
Prepare to copy.
You're listening to the 911 Strong podcast.
Don't act like I never told you.
With Aram and Kristen, bringing you stimulating discussion.
No, I like the sound of that.
An entertaining conversation.
And now, here's Kristen and Aram.
Hey friends, welcome back to the 911 Strong podcast. With me, as always, is my fearless co-host, Kristen. What's up?
Hi, guys.
You're not doing the usual, hey.
Hey. Hi.
All right. As promised, folks, we have a very special guest with us. She's a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu brown belt, a badass law enforcement officer in the Southern California area. And she's an MMA fighter who teaches defensive tactics. And we'll go into more of that in a little bit. But give a warm welcome to our special friend, Ashley Smashley Cummins.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is really cool to be on your podcast.
Yeah, what I think makes it really cool is that I've been a big fan of yours, and then before we recorded, you showed us your screenshot of our podcast listed in your favorites. So that really means a lot to us. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. It's exciting to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So just before we get into what you actually do, maybe our listeners who aren't familiar with you want to find out the foundations of who Ashley is. You're a defensive tactics coach instructor. You're a police officer. You're an MMA badass. But where did you learn all that stuff? I mean, what was the road that took you to there? Were you always interested in law enforcement and martial arts, or did one lead to the other?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up as a child doing Taekwondo. In high school, I wanted to join my high school wrestling team and start kickboxing. I always knew I wanted to try to fight, like learn how to fight. But my mom was like, absolutely not. I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want boys touching you a certain way during wrestling. Like that's what she said to me. So, and then I've always been interested in law enforcement, but I was always more interested in like the federal side of it. And then in college, I started studying criminal justice, and I got an internship with a local police department. I was like, this is awesome. Like, I want to do this. So that's when I decided to not try to go federal and just go local.
Right.
And I mean, I just fell in love with being a cop, and which is weird because like no one of my family's in the service. Like I have no military or like first responder family members. So, but it's something I remember I wanted to do, like even like in middle school.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we have to get our influences from somewhere, and someone in the family has to start the legacy. So who better than Ashley to start that? It's funny that you mentioned you had an interest in going federal first. It reminds me of a question I just recently got. Someone asked why go local as opposed to federal. And there's not a huge difference in terms of pay and benefits maybe, but for me, it was locality. I don't know if it was for you, but I knew I didn't want to travel. I wanted to be grounded in one area. And maybe have a family, and I didn't want to put them through having to move every few years. What was your reason for trying to stay local?
That was exactly it. Once I started to learn more and how federal agencies pretty much force you to move and could force you to move every couple of years, like
Right.
I don't like how like don't have control where you end up. Like
Right.
that's always kind of bothered me, and that's made me want to just stay as a as a local officer.
Right. Well, speaking of controlling where you end up, you're in the Southern California area now, but you only moved here, you said back in 2018.
Yes.
And prior to that, you were a police officer for the St. Louis Police Department?
St. Louis County Police Department.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, if you moved in 2018, that means you were there during some tumultuous times in the St. Louis area. Did that influence any part of why you moved?
No, not at all. My agency in St. Louis, I was there for 8 years and I loved it. Very happy at my agency. And it was a larger agency. There was a lot of opportunities for specialized units, a lot of movement. I moved to California for my family.
Okay.
It's a long story, but pretty much my parents and my sister moved to LA. And my fiance and I met while we were in St. Louis, and we were together for a few years in St. Louis, and she was born and raised in San Diego. So with her family in San Diego, and now mine moved to LA, we were just kind of like, well, we need to be close to our families.
Right.
So they're getting older and I want to be able to take care of my parents. So that's why I made the jump. Otherwise I would have stayed there forever.
Right. Because you were born and raised there, as you mentioned.
Born and raised St. Louis.
Yeah, so was that a hard, I mean, now that you have family here, I guess it would be easier, but was that a hard transition for you to leave your department for 8 years and someplace you were familiar with and a community that you were invested in to have to come to a place that was all brand new?
It was very hard. I was very homesick for a really long time. All my best friends are in St. Louis, and I still, even 3.5 years later, get homesick when I think about it. Yeah, I mean, and I loved my agency out there. I was in a really badass unit there, and I could have stayed there the rest of my career, never had to go back to patrol, and I gave it up, for a family, but it's a decision that, I'll never regret, because in my mind, like, family always comes first.
Right.
Yeah. Is there a big cultural difference between that department there and like over here in Southern California?
Yeah, it's been policing's a lot different out here, and my first year here, it was honestly a struggle because I didn't go to the police academy in California. So I had to relearn everything, relearn laws, even safety tactics are different out here, like, codes, everything. So it took a year to like adjust, but now I feel like comfortable out here, like being an officer.
That's interesting. Kristen and I, we both travel across the country and we speak on various law enforcement topics. And one of the things I always have learned, especially from administrators from other agencies from across the country, is that they say, as California goes, so does the rest of the law enforcement states. So is that true? Do you think now that since you've had a foundation at St. Louis and you come to California, do you think California is more progressive, or do you think being from St. Louis that you guys did a lot of things differently that was better for law enforcement?
That's a hard question to answer. It kind of just depends on the topic. There's things that I think my last agency in St. Louis was better with, but then there's some things out here that I think is better for officers. Like, and then there's things in California, I'm like, this is wrong. Like, they shouldn't do it this way. St. Louis did it this way and it's better, and like vice versa. So it kind of just depends on the topic. But I went from a very large agency to a small agency out here, so that's been an adjustment too.
Sure.
So
yeah, the same for me. I started at the sheriff's department, which was a very large agency, and I'm at a much smaller agency. I'm happy here, and obviously, I have that perspective. But I think we have a lot of people in California now that are considering leaving the state and going outside, and you did the exact opposite. Now that you're here and you see the politics and everything like that, I mean, is California home now for you, or do you see yourself leaving one day?
I think this is home. I mean, my fiance and I every once in a while talk about leaving, and that's only just because of cost of living. Otherwise, we're happy here. But I mean, people don't, people always say like, oh, California this, California that, I'm moving, but they don't realize like a lot of places, that every place has its own issues. Like, coming from St. Louis, you kind of mentioned it, but the Ferguson riots happened there, and that changed policing forever, especially like in the St. Louis area. I do think it's gotten a lot better in St. Louis since the Ferguson riots, but I mean, it was really hard to be a cop there for
Yeah.
several years after that incident.
Did you have to deploy out to any of the riots?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had front row seats every night. They took away all of our days off for months. I was actually the fourth officer to arrive on scene of that incident.
Oh, wow.
So I was like two traffic stops, like two traffic lights out from when the shots fired call came out. I got there right away.
Wow.
Yeah. So you've been through two heavy sets of riots then too, right? Because I'm sure you had to deal with the 2020 stuff as well. Was it- Huh?
You talking about the La Mesa?
Yeah.
Riots?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, for the whole like summer of 2020, the whole George Floyd thing that took over everywhere. Did that affect you guys where you were at this time around, or was it more maybe
I was
external
just-
agencies?
I was just sent out to help during the La Mesa riots, and from what I saw, that was like nothing compared to what happened during Ferguson. That was like Ferguson, like I can't even describe like what I saw like for months and months and months, and then like it cooled down for a few months, and then the 1 year anniversary when they announced like no indictment, like it started all over again. Like that was I think it's kind of cool in a sense, like that's history, and I can say like I'm a part of history, but it was also hard at the same time. There was a lot of scary moments during the riots. So
Yeah, I'd imagine you probably, when you see stories like that today, and I can relate when you say, yeah, it's kind of cool that you were a part of it. But that I'm sure there was a lot of things that you saw there that you wish you hadn't in your career. So now that you're in a position where you're an instructor, you teach defensive tactics, and you've actually had been there with boots on the ground. Do you impart some of that experience to your students?
I do. I don't necessarily like reference the riots, but a lot of like situations I have been in my career where someone was trying to take my life. I definitely, my goal is like when I teach, I want these officers or future officers, because I teach at academies too, I want them to be a better cop than I ever was.
Right.
So I tell them about all the mistakes I made in critical incidents or just mistakes in general, because I want them to be better than me. So yeah, I do reference, critical incidents like similar to Ferguson.
Right. If any of our listeners goes on to your Instagram page, which is Smashley Ashley, they'll see videos of you and your students participating in the defensive tactics scenarios. And one of the things I like is you actually place them in positions where they'll encounter in the streets, which I really like. Where do you get the idea to do that? Do you learn from other trainers, or are these ideas that you come up with yourself from your fighting experience?
It's kind of both. A lot of it, I mean, some of it's personal experience, things that situations I've been in as a police officer. I'm a dork and I like to watch like a lot of YouTube videos of, hands-on situations with officers. So I can kind of see like, okay, what tends to work for officers, what situations, like what tactics don't work, and what are a lot of positions officers get put in when people try to fight or resist. And I do attend a lot of training on my own time. I pay for a lot of outside training with, combative specifically for officers or just combative situations in general. And I try to learn as much as I can from each instructor so I can become a better instructor.
Awesome. So what do you think the biggest deficiency is right now with defensive tactics, now that you're teaching at the academy and you're teaching outside classes? Is what we teach in the academy enough?
No, it's not. And I mean, even past the academy, a majority of police agencies are not giving officers the training they need to stay safe. So, and this is not just a California thing, it's across the country. And it's honestly one of the biggest problems I feel in our profession is we're not giving officers the training they need to stay safe and keep citizens safe. I mean, even the suspects that are trying to fight us and resist, if officers knew how to properly control a suspect, not only would there be less injuries for the officer, but there's less injuries for the suspect as well.